Hello, good people, arrogant atheists again here with you. This from the Washington Post. Don't you love the Washington Post? My prediction, Washington Post going to be the last paper standing. What a great paper still. Paper of Woodward and Bernstein. People don't fuck around, man. The Washington Post. And they know, as we all know, that Christians are more than twice as likely to blame a person's poverty on lack of effort. No surprise. I grew up in a Puritan household. My mom's favorite expression was, "God helps those who help themselves." What's that saying? There's no God, but you need to work your ass off and do the right thing in life. You know, it's basically a tacit admission, for one thing, on the part of Christians that there is no God. Think about it. God helps those who help themselves. That's pretty much saying that if you just pray for help, you're not going to get it, because prayer alone is completely ineffectual. But anyway, it's an old saw. It's a chestnut. It's a saying from the day that maybe not a lot of people hear anymore. Or maybe you don't hear it if you weren't Puritan like I was. Maybe Catholics don't have that saying. But to me, it sums up the thinking among Puritans that if you're in a dire circumstance, it's because you're a piece of shit and it's your own fault. And I love my mom. You know, she's a beautiful woman. She took care of us, but she always had that because of the way she was raised. It's pretty typical. New England Puritan tradition where you needed to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get your ass in gear, and if you didn't, it was probably your fault, unless you were really disabled or something like that. But nobody else got a pass. It was like, yeah, well, that guy's poor because he's lazy, and he lays around smoking cigarettes and drinking rum instead of going to church and living right. And and of course, there's a certain amount of truth to the fact that if you work harder, better things are going to happen for you. But the point of the study that the Post is looking at is that Christians, especially evangelical Christians, are almost twice as likely to blame poverty on your personal lack of effort, whereas others, a little bit more reasonably, blame at least part of it on circumstances that are completely beyond your control. And not surprisingly, those lines break down along political ones too. Typically, Republican tools are more likely to think that if you're hurting, it's just because you're stupid and lazy, whereas Democrats are more likely to think that it's probably circumstance that has led you to the poverty or other bad times that you're in. There's not a whole lot to make of this other than this is just how the American ethos has evolved through the survival of the Puritan branch of Christianity that really doesn't survive anywhere else in the world that I'm aware of. The folks came from Holland, but only because England couldn't even stand them at first, and Holland hated them too. But Holland, in the day of the Pilgrims, was at least a tolerant society where they would make fun of you behind closed doors while they twirled their mustaches and their black hats, their Van Dyke style there in the 1700s. But they figured that it was your right to be as stupid as you wanted to be. So they didn't persecute the Puritans as much. The Puritans still felt so out of place in a modernizing society that Europe was in the late 1700s, the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and knowledge beyond what people could have imagined just a few hundred years before. The Puritans were so uncomfortable with that they went to an unknown continent full of natives that they had no idea if they were going to be hostile, or they had no idea what the winters were going to be like, and they almost didn't make it because it was shitty. That's how badly they wanted to go and be able to worship in this really backwards, bad way. They went to a new unknown continent and carved out of the wilderness this great country. And again, none of us will deny that the hard work and the historical work ethic of the American has led to great successes on this continent. But to tie it specifically to your level of Christianity is, of course, just absurd. And at this point, poverty cannot be blamed on any one thing, especially in a country like this. And the whole thing kind of goes together as a ball of a vicious cycle of circumstances, which have then led to a lack of effort for a million different reasons, none of which are necessarily the fault of the individual. So once again, we see that fundamental Christianity in America is pretty simply an embarrassment to an evolved way of thinking. Needs to go away, and hopefully when we're done with the turd that's in office now, who's shamelessly panders to evangelicals like he gives a shit. Hopefully we can, the pendulum will kind of go like that, like I talked about before. Wow, we'll get an ultra-liberal guy, and religion will even take a bigger step into ignominy, which is where it's headed. We all know what the numbers are in, so enjoy it while you got it. You guys suck. It's not people's fault that they're in poverty. Well, some of them maybe, but most of them no. And honestly, just read a book and get with the times, all right?